Salutations, fellow nerds. I'm Rick Y, and today is March 12th, 2025. The early 2000s were a little difficult because no matter what you tried to do or say, the Republicans refused to believe anything that Democrats or progressives had to bring to the table. Sound familiar? You can blame people like Newt Gingrich for that. This loyalty remains so steadfast that it was well until after the fact that conservatives were willing to call the spade a spade and admit when they were wrong. Right now, I'm currently seeing the same thing happen when it comes to Trump, the economy, and the policies that he's chosen to introduce. And on top of that, I observe a distinct inability for conservatives now to blame Trump, just as they did when old W was wandering around the White House. And I think we all know how that ended. So if you dig news, history, or humorous American hogwash, make sure to drop a poop emoji down in the comments, because blue hearts are actually not that great. And why not? It's a smiling poop. It's basically every American in the eyes of every other person in the world right now. One of the more frustrating things going back was how long it took for Republicans to generally understand that George W. Bush was a bad president. The biggest frustration that a lot of us on the progressive front feel is this system wherein democracies often move as fast as our slowest people, and that's fine. But that means that instead of making huge sweeping moves, we all have to discuss and convince others of our positions in order to sway their support. Those who constantly take pride in being stubborn are inherently a bane to this system. Those who guide their lives exclusively by traditional methodologies are also a bane to this system. This was a huge issue under Bush. The immediate example that comes to my mind when I say this is climate change. Back then, I remember conservatives were up in arms over the idea that climate change and global warming was just a hoax. To this day, some diehards are still just as convinced of this as some are that the earth is flat. You can demonstrate every example in the book and provide every piece of peer-reviewed scientific research, and they will refute it until there's some way for them to personally see or experience it for themselves. And converts to the thought processes are simply turncoats who've been sucked up by propaganda. Mind you, having this kind of presupposition only makes it impossible to ever absorb new information and apply it logically. And a lot like the hole in the ozone, which finally closed when global efforts had the audacity to come together and collectively ban chlorofluorocarbons. Anybody in a closed space while their moms were doing their hairs in the 80s and 90s could have easily told you that shit was World War I trench warfare shit. Anyways, to seatbelt laws, there are always going to be people who scream about their freedoms being infringed upon and how their personal individual freedoms are somehow more important than the collective. The Bush era was specifically full of these types of conservatives, and I was surrounded by them. Legit, we probably could have had electric cars decades ago were it not for people who refused to believe in climate science, in car safety, in the dangers of cigarettes, and lead. But now, even large swaths of conservatives are seeing the writing on the wall, and they're willing to accept that we are indeed going through a change in the climate. But even that goalpost has moved from, it ain't happening, to, okay, it's happening, but it ain't my fault. And this need to be correct by conservatives had people not only confident in this incorrect position, but some were illegally modifying their vehicles so they could purposely burn fuel less efficiently and roll coal. This is what they think makes liberals cry, so they take pleasure in it. I don't see the appeal. Now that their president is telling them to buy Teslas, it's hilarious to me, but I digress. There is a weird pride attached to admitting when they are wrong, and it has slowed social and scientific progression for decades. And a lot like then, there's this severe refusal to look at the facts and apply them to our current reality. One of those strategies was to take all of the damage of the Bush years and then immediately blame Obama the second he took office. Then, when he spent 8 years fixing that mess, Trump was elected and took immediate credit for the positive economic numbers. One of the earliest examples of this was in March of 2017 when he took credit for business transactions that had been agreed to well before his nomination and even presidency. Trends that had begun under Obama, like employment numbers, Trump took credit for until they started trending downward in his first 36 months. Now, here we are, March into his second term, and only after he implemented his own policies, we are starting to see a dramatic shift downward. and, as many economists point out, a looming recession. And Trump and his surrogates are just saying that it's Biden's fault. Take a look at these two pictures. This first picture is the growth under the entirety of Biden's tenure in office. We see a small dip there, but honestly, given the COVID at the time and the volatility of the markets across the world, fewer gains were to be expected. If you notice, however, its lowest dip was still well above where the market stood at the beginning of Biden's first 2 years. It then experienced rapid growth from that point onward and broke record after record. To claim that this was somehow negative and that economic woes we currently experience are due to steady, constant growth and profit margins is, to be blunt, completely absurd. Now let's take a look at Trump's term thus far. Wow. Steady decline right from the outset. If we use the same metrics that Trump used in his first term to credit himself with a booming economy, this graph here demonstrates that he was either lying to you then or he's lying to you now. I guess his supporters are just going to have to decide because all I hear from them is cope. What's worse is this is before the new tariffs even hit. These numbers are market anxiety. Every single person who is reporting on this who doesn't currently work at the direct behest of the Trump administration are all agreeing that this is due to Trump policies specifically, nothing more. The newest round of tariffs have not made things better. These notable sell-offs have actually erased literally all of the gains that have been made since post-election. This could theoretically change, but I'm not sure how, given the retaliatory tariffs, consumer confidence levels, and the employment numbers. Not to mention the freezing of funds to farmers who provide assistance to social safety net programs and USAID. The most unfortunate thing is I know that my comments will have the inevitable fanboy who is just going to refuse the graphs, the data, the history, and everything just to abdicate their loyalty to one of the frumpiest diaper babies and his henchmen. Look, the issue is that not only will it be too late for these people to admit when they're wrong, I feel like when they do finally admit when they're wrong, they're going to feel defensive about being wrong, as if they have any influence over Trump's behavior. They'll spin it in a way that will again blame their opposition while taking no responsibility nor blame for the actions of, again, some completely other dude who isn't even aware of their existence on this planet. It baffles the mind because it betrays this need to be loyal to men above all else. And it's that really patriotism, or is it just a cult of personality? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, I really appreciate you guys who watch the content. If it's worth it to you, consider liking and subscribing. It's free, and the bigger channels like mine get, the more it makes toxic incels squeal. Just remember to stay informed, stay engaged, and most of all, stay decent. Y'all come back now. You hear?